Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Chatting from Blank. Going to be taking a look at Rune, thanks to Dave on Twitter for the request. Personally, at first glance, this is not a coin I am necessarily interested in. Maybe throughout the episode, there might be a bit of interest for me. I know it recently had a hack which forced it to put in a move like we can see right now, that I'm pointing out back in January, February. I mean, that was when the market was tumbling, but I think it also did have some sort of hack. So that could have led to a more drastic sell-off than a lot of other coins. The reason I was saying it's not massively a coin I have interest in right now is simply because of how poorly it's performed off the low. Not too bad, I guess. Around 130% move off the low, which is better than some altcoins. We do have this gap above on the monthly. If we start to draw our levels now, and then we can use the volume profile as well, what we have is a bit of a gap above between this basically $2 to $4 area. We can see there's a bit of a gap in the volume profile, which shows there's a good sign of a lack of liquidity here, which when we get good conditions on altcoins, if we get like a flip into these low volume node areas, a lot of the time you can see price accelerate to the other side, especially if this move was a big overreaction to some sort of news or hack or whatever it was. It could essentially retrace that move pretty easily. So on the monthly, we have this $2 level, which I think is pretty important, and we'll get into the lower time frame. But overall, yeah, it's a coin that is, it's quite an old coin now. It's not a coin I would necessarily look to pick up, but I would in spot for like a long-term position, but it would be something I would be interested in trading if we find a position today. So we got these 3 monthly levels I've marked out right now, and then we also have a bit of a monthly resistance up towards $6.5 to $7, and then from there probably looking as high as $15 in terms of a flip above 6.5, then probably can get a move towards $15. Until then, this is kind of the near-term trade I would be looking at. I think anything above here right now is not something I'm interested in, but a move towards $4 could be on the card if we get a flip of $2. So taking a look at the weekly, a bit of a momentum divergence into the lows, which gave a decent reaction from Rune. I quite like this sort of structure on the higher time frame, these weekly momentum divergences on the Awesome Oscillator against price. Sometimes you have confluence with them on the RSI, but this time around we have no confluence for such setup right now. We are sort of still trading in this lower range on the weekly, and we do need to flip above $2 for me to see some sort of interest in Rune. This is a big level. We can basically see not just using the volume profile, but in price. A lot of the time what happens when you get like a strong break into this area, it moves to the other side. Obviously this failed, but in this case, a strong move up. This time it failed, and then a strong move down. So overall, I think if we start to flip $2, you can be looking at taking a trade towards $3 and then $4 on Rune. So it's a matter of us now finding an entry for this sort of setup. I mean, it could potentially be back towards this high volume node POC, right, on a market wide pullback. Maybe buying back towards this point of control could be a good place to buy. A lot of the time when you move away from these point of controls and come back to them, this is the setup you want to be looking at. So in terms of a limit on Rune, I think somewhere towards this 1.5 down to 1.2 area could be a nice place. The other scenario I'm looking at right now is, like I said, the one that has been catching my main eye right now and is a flip above $2, specifically more 2.1. Looking at the daily, it's a bit of an awkward chart. I mean, again, we're trading under a big resistance here on the daily for Rune. Not a massive area I'd be a fan of longing into. We go back to the weekly, probably got a bit of a weekly demand here. So I think if we got a pullback on the market, like a decent flush from the market, a market wide flush, I think buying into 1.5 down to that high volume node POC that I mentioned at 126 is the best place for Rune. In terms of a limit, I think buying into something like that could be a really nice setup for Rune. trading back towards that range high, right? We're in this big weekly range. But until then, probably look at, you know, the idea that if it deviates here, it could give us a nice short setup. Although I'm not massively favoring shorts right now until I see a decent spike up on BTC. I don't like shorting into very slow price action. I like to see a big spike up and then a rejection. And that could be the same for any altcoin as well. So we'll annotate down here limits. Weekly demand. So we'll set some limits, you know, not necessarily for me, but if you were willing to or wanted to buy into some Rune spot, then I think limits around 1.5 down to 1.26 looks like the best place to be a buyer. Otherwise, we're going to be looking for some sort of momentum trade on Rune. Let's take a look at the EMAs. So the EMAs actually just got a nice buy crossover. So this is the EMA 81 and the EMA 20, the 89 and the 21, apologies. So what I'd be cautious of, right? EMAs are a lagging indicator. We can see here when we got the buy crossover that it actually did lead to a move up from Rune. But then also here we can see as Rune moved into this big resistance, right? It also caught the EMA buy crossover, and then from there it just continued to trade down. So just because we got this buy crossover doesn't mean it necessarily that it should be a good place to become a buyer, but it is a good thing for us to have right now in terms of looking for a breakout on Rune. If the market continues to trade higher, there's a pretty good chance that this daily EMA setup could lead to that move. So the daily didn't offer me too much, so we're going to take a look at the lower time frame and see if there's anything to keep an eye on. If you wanted to be really aggressive, you could look for a reaction around this daily / weekly level on the lower time frame. By that I mean a breakdown, failed break below here, and a reclaim. This is the sort of place you would look at taking an entry. I don't sort of blindly enter on breakouts. I like to see a lot of the time some strong structure around a key level, and then some sort of like reclaim, flip. For example, a V-shape. If price broke down and V-shaped back above here, again, that would be a nice place to look for a move higher. I have an educational video on my channel. MSM episode 5 it's called. I talk about structure there. If you want to go check that out, that might be beneficial to you to identify like lower time frame triggers on altcoins. But for now, M5 EMA looks pretty strong. I think there's a good chance that maybe if Rune, like I said, shows some strength around here, we could see an acceleration to that $3 and even to that $4 area with BTC, you know, staying in this price discovery. I definitely think there's a good chance for altcoins to continue higher. So to summarize, EMAs have had a good buy crossover. Definitely going to be keeping an eye on a potential breakout from Rune, especially if it can flip above this $2 area. There's a good chance of seeing a move towards $3 and $4. You know, it is resistance on the weekly. The weekly is trading into this area, so we have to be cautious not to completely top long it here, especially with these where Bitcoin is right now, and where the weekly is trading. It's important to keep a close eye on the lower time frame price action and work around the higher time frame levels with the lower time frame. So looking for probably a move down into this area, followed by some nice structure, like I said, into here, reclaim. I think maybe we can look at taking a long on Rune. Until then, I think it seems quite drastic, but you could probably set some limits in towards 1.5. That's only a 30% move from here. If the market did see a market-wide flush, that would be a good place to pick up some spot. Historically, like 30 to 40% pullbacks are good areas on alts to pull back. That pretty much puts us at 10 minutes, and that's everything for this week's Charting from Blank episode. Hope this was useful in some way or another. Not a massively convincing chart for me, or one that I could really get to the bottom of, and that's fine. I'm not going to force a setup if it's not there, but the two setups I gave today are the ones that I would keep an eye on. I will see you guys next week.